It is written in the scriptures that we should journey to Jerusalem 3 times a year. We are going up to the city of God, to Jerusalem, to celebrate.
The Lord told the children of Israel to honor 7 holy celebrations each year involving 3 journeys to Jerusalem. Each festival would be uniquely fulfilled in the coming of the Messiah. The holy days of our Lord, shadows of things to come.
These are the feasts of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. On the 15th day of the month, the Lord's feast of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, remove the yeast from your house, hold a sacred assembly, and do no regular work. Celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt.
Shalom, hello again. Well, this is an agrarian nation, Israel. Barley fields, wheat fields everywhere, and of course, making bread was one of the things they did very well, especially unleavened bread. And there's even an entire festival of unleavened bread. The second feast in Leviticus 23 is called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It really is distinct from Passover. In Leviticus 23:5, it says, the 14th day of the first month at evening is the Lord's Passover. But in verse 6, it says, on the next night, the 15th, begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Today, the Jewish people have one festival they simply call Passover, and it incorporates both of those feasts. And even first fruits, the Sunday during the week, is in that feast. But really, it's a distinct feast, and it described a holy walk, 7 days of fasting from leaven. Leaven in the Bible is sin. You were to go along all 7 days and eat no leaven or chametz, in Hebrew, the stuff that is sinful. And they actually, for Passover, did a search of the leaven, cleaned the house out of all chametz. The search is, well, I think it was the invention that came to be called spring cleaning universally, but it started in the Exodus. And they had to search their dwellings to make sure there were no crumbs of bread. You know, today they clean the breadboard with a toothpick. They look for every Twinkie wrapper. They get everything out of the kitchen that had anything at all to do with leaven, because unleavenedness is the way that prepares you for deliverance. It's cleanness, it's holiness, it's purity. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:7, purge out the old leaven and become a new lump, for Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Well, the history of the thing, it runs from the 15th day of Nisan through the 21st day. Nisan is the first month of the year. It's about deliverance. When you're unleavened, well, you're able to be delivered. So that first Passover in the Exodus, where the people baked bread without leaven, they took the wheat, the barley, they made a kind of a flour, but without leaven, and then they cooked a bread that came out flat. They served it with the lamb at the Passover, and they had no leaven, and the Lord passed over them. They marked their doorpost, of course, you know the story. But the idea of being unleavened was the readiness to be delivered. And chametz became the impulse to evil. The yetzer hara, they say in Hebrew, the natural impulse toward sin. And so they get rid of it. You know, they even go through a ceremony here where they sell the leaven that's in their possession to someone for the 8-day Passover festival. There's a man at the hotel where we're staying on our tour, the Renaissance Hotel, an Arab gentleman, who takes over possession, so to speak, of all the leaven of the Orthodox people that stay at this hotel. They sell it to him, in effect, and after the 8 days, retrieve it back, but they don't have it in their possession for the Passover season. And they acted out before the Passover Seder by doing a candlelight search of the house for crumbs of leaven. They make a game out of it. They hide them on the furniture and the bookcases, and they send the children out to look for it. And he comes with a feather and a wooden spoon, and he cleans the leaven into the spoon with the feather and throws it in the fire. The fire is a judgment of each little sin. Each little crumb is a sin. It's a crumb of leaven, a crumb of sin. And so that's judgment, fire burning it up. Leavened bread requires an oven, which implies a permanent home, which they were going to have in the Promised Land. But that night they were in such a hurry they could not wait for bread to rise. They could not use leaven. They baked unleavened bread, and the Lord, for his part, he passed over their homes when he slew the firstborn of all the Egyptians, even the firstborn of the animals. And so the Jews were delivered from slavery. Well, bread is just a subject you find throughout the Bible. It's what part delivered them. They, of course, it was a practical matter to bake with unleavened flour that night and make bread that did not rise because it's much faster. They say a piece of unleavened bread cooks in 18 seconds. And then out in the wilderness, God gave them manna. That's the way they were sustained. Then the Lord saying, I'm the bread of life, and so on. Born in Bethlehem, the house of bread in Hebrew. And so like a piece of unleavened bread. Here's the unleavened bread. It's just a normal-looking piece of flour that cooks real fast. But, you know, when you look at it, the Lord said, this is my body. And it is very like his body. It's unleavened, of course, having no sin like his body. It has stripes. By his stripes are we healed. You can see that. It's pierced with holes. If you hold it up to the light, you can easily see that there's rows of holes. You have to punch it through because you grill it, and the heat has to come through. There's no rising agent. And finally, you know, it's covered with little bruises, bruised for our iniquities. It's so like his body, and you know, when we get our salvation, it's like this. His body's broken for us. We ingest some of that, and with that we take in that quality of rising forth from the earth like he did. The blessing he said at the Passover table, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. It says he took the bread, broke it, blessed it. That's the blessing he said. It means, blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who bringest forth bread from the earth. And there was a little prophecy in there at that Last Supper, saying to the men, if they try to put my body in the earth this week, don't worry about it. God brings forth bread from the earth. Well, you know, throughout his ministry he spoke of bread. There was a testing of one of his disciples on the occasion of the feeding of the 5,000. In John 6 it says this, verse 4, and the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these might eat? He asked that of Philip because Philip was from Bethsaida. This is where this took place. And perhaps he'd know a bakery that could fulfill such a big contract. It wasn't the unleavened bread because it says the feast was nigh, so it wasn't there yet. But they were on their way to Jerusalem for the feast. And it says in the next verse, he said this to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip answers him very logically. There's, you know, even if we had the money for an enormous amount of bread, it still wouldn't be enough, and so on. And of course, he finds the lad with the loaves and fishes. And then the only miracle told by all four Gospels takes place, where he feeds the 5,000 from that little boy's lunch. The idea here of bread going to so many and sustaining them is a little like manna, and that's how Philip could have passed the test. The right answer was, Lord, don't ask me where do we buy bread. You don't need to buy bread. Why, the Father sent bread down from heaven to sustain the children of Israel. You can do the same. Just wave your mighty arm and everyone will be fed, and that would have been the passing grade. Well, Jesus was truly the unleavened bread himself, and the scripture is clear on it. We look further at Luke 12:1 and 2, where Jesus talks about leaven, not precisely as sin, but in this case of doctrine. It says, in the meantime, where there were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people, insomuch that they trod on one another, he began to say unto his disciples, first of all, beware ye of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. For there's nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. They had the Jewish tendency to cover over things with stories and sayings of rabbis and wise sages and all the rest of that. And didn't mean a row of beans. The Lord said their doctrine was wrong, and so it was. You know, the search for the leaven is very symbolic when we do that on Passover. The leaven has to be gotten out of the house, as we said, and in a way, the Lord searches us too. The psalmist says in Psalm 139, "Search me, O Lord, and know me." And we give ourselves to him as to be made unleavened, to be made pure. Well, sin, you know, is never popular with anybody, but in Israel, this festival of unleavened bread, well, in Jewish homes everywhere, it's an annual reminder of our obligation to be holy. God doesn't tolerate sin. And this 7-day walk, this traveling along in life, not a one-day festival like Passover, but a week-long, the eating of the bread, is kind of a demonstration of holy living. They make quite a fuss over it in Israel. The final run at the bakery, what they call the last bake, is done in the afternoon before Passover. Now, when I say that, remember the Jewish day starts at sundown. So it isn't even Passover day yet in that afternoon, but a last bake is done of the unleavened bread, and people come to that and make a fuss over that. And our crew happened to go there, and we can show you how the last bake looks.
Most of the people who come here are not working here. As a matter of fact, almost nobody works here. Everybody who comes are people who want to take part themselves in the making of the matzah. Instead of going to the supermarket and picking it up wrapped in cellophane, you want to make it yourself, have a part. And there's also a special mitzvah or a special good quality of making matzahs on the afternoon before the Passover Seder. Because many, many years ago, when there was a temple, this was the time when the Paschal sacrifice was offered, and then everybody would come together to have the family dinner with the offerings. So today, there's no temple, there are no sacrifices, but what we do is we do something at the same time when these sacrifices were given, and that this making of the matzah is a continuation of that same kind of a pattern of rushing and hustling around. There's so many things to do at home and so many things to get ready. But you take a break, go make the matzahs, and then you go on.
You see here the flour comes through. By pressing the button, an exact amount is being measured. The amount of water is exactly measured according to the containers that we're using in order to mix the water and the flour, so that the mixture water-flour is exactly what it's supposed to be. The container with the mixture is being brought here. Dough's being mixed. After a certain time, again, exactly timed, the person takes the container with the dough. It's being poured into the matzah making machine. From here, the dough is being rolled out. It goes along this conveyor belt. Towards the end, it goes through that particular roll in order to make holes inside the dough, so that the dough has no chance of having any air holes inside. And at this point, the dough goes into the oven. The whole process takes around 2.5 minutes.
On the afternoon of Passover, it's already forbidden to have leavened dough or bread or anything of that type. So when the machine runs for 18 minutes, the pieces that are left are now forbidden. There's no point cleaning because it's too late. So as a result, there's only one run. If you get the matzahs from that run, you have them. And if you came all the way out here and you wasted an hour in the course of the day or an hour and a half, you want to be pretty sure you got something for your time. Because if you don't get them from now, that's it till next year.
You know, this last bake, matzah, is passed out free to the people. That's one reason why it's popular. They come around for it. But I wonder if, instead of thinking of simply free bread, that it equals salvation, the free gift of God, because the baking is done at the same time as the sacrifice at the temple was done on that afternoon. And, of course, we know what that leads to. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't run around and search for leaven like other kids, because in my family, I happened to have the job of being the charosis maker. That's the stuff that means brick mortar in the Passover service. It's made of apples and nuts and cinnamon and a little wine mixed together. It's delicious, but mine was especially delicious, and I'm prepared to reveal the secret of my charosis. I picked the nuts off of the honey cake that was bought for the Passover, and all those walnuts had a little bit of honey on each one, and when I grated those into my charosis, it was especially sweet, and everybody loved it. But that's the secret. I've never told it before, and if you make charosis, try that. You know that the nuts are kosher because the whole honey cake is kosher for Passover. Anyway, we went to a friend. We have many rabbinical friends in Israel. We went to Rabbi Noach, who tells us about the leaven ceremonies, how they search out the leaven in the house.
A very important aspect of Passover is, of course, the prohibition not only of eating, but of seeing or having in one's possession any leaven throughout the 7 days of Passover. So on the eve of Passover, in other words, the night before the night of Passover, we must search assiduously for the leaven throughout the house. It's a very beautiful custom to distribute a few pieces of leaven wrapped in tin foil so that they won't spread abroad, because after all, we don't want the house to be polluted with leaven again. The father will have hidden those pieces of leaven wrapped in tin foil, and the children, in the course of searching the leaven, will find them. The search is performed at night with candlelight, because the light of a candle, when a candle is lit, when all around is darkness, enables one to see much better, might seem ironic, than in daylight or even than with an electric light. And therefore, when we find the crumbs, we sweep them up with a little feather and scoop them up, and then gather them together with the leaven wrapped up in tin foil that we know the children will have found. And then, of course, the next day, we will burn them. All bread and leaven that is in my possession, that I have or have not seen, that I have or have not destroyed, shall be nullified and shall be public like the dust of the earth. May it be your will, O God, my Lord and Lord of my fathers, that just as I have removed all leaven from my house and property, so may you destroy all evil forces and remove the spirit of wickedness from your world. No matter how thoroughly we have looked inside ourselves for the evil inclination, to expurgate it, to destroy it, man must know that no matter how hard he tries, he will continue, always, on some level, to transgress. The evil inclination is so pervasive that ultimately we believe that it is only with the help of God that we can defeat it. Man, left to his own devices, is incapable of destroying the evil inclination, only with God's help.
You know, when you think about it, the leaven, it's always burned, whether they throw it in a fireplace at some places or burn it the way we saw Rabbi Noach and in this tradition, it's always burnt. And, of course, fire is the judgment of sin. Those little crumbs of leaven are little sins, and the fire burns them up and purifies them. And, you know, then you have just an unleavened household. And, of course, unleavened bread is the symbol of Messiah. That's the Messiah again. After sins are judged and he takes the judgment, then we can partake of him. Avi Mitzrachi, our friend, a Messianic Jew in Israel, explains.
Avi, we're doing a series on the Feast of Israel, Leviticus 23. This particular program addresses the Feast of Unleavened Bread. What does that feast mean to you especially?
Well, when we think about the unleavened bread, I think about the matzo bread. That's how we call it. And for us, like for example, I went with my children yesterday in the morning. We went and we burned all the bread, the leftovers of the bread, and we are prepared and ready to take the Passover meal. For us, it has a deep, deep meaning because we are believers in Yeshua, in Jesus. So in this Passover evening, Leil Seder, as we celebrate it, we share how Yeshua, our Passover lamb, okay, as we have the shank bone on the table, we remember the Passover lamb, that because of him, because of the blood that was set on the doors, we were saved from death. We came out from slavery into freedom, and we celebrate the fulfillment in Yeshua. Therefore, we leave behind everything that has to do with sin and old and past, coming into the newness of life, and it's found only in the Messiah.
Well, when someone accepts Yeshua, Jesus, into their lives, do the feasts have meaning?
Oh yes, it has a lot of meaning to them, because suddenly the feast is fulfilled in the Messiah, and things that maybe the religious had taken out of context, okay, we leave it aside, but we show how it's been fulfilled in the Messiah. So we take the feast and show it's been fulfilled in the Messiah, and has a deeper meaning to us.
Well, what would you say to a person who knows very little about the feast, if anything? Do you think they're missing very much?
Born-again believers that do not really understand the feast, they are missing something very important. Now, I want to clarify this by studying the feast, studying the scriptures from the Old Testament. I am not imposing for you to go under the law. If this is how you understand it, then I'm sorry, but you have a very limited understanding of the scriptures, because all the feasts, the Jewish biblical feasts, are like a foreshadow, you say,
yes,
for the revelation that was supposed to come. Today we are wise because we look back, we have the revelation. But if we go more than 2,000 years ago, they didn't have the revelation. They just have an understanding of the scriptures, and they were looking forward for that person, for the anointed one, the Messiah, who will come and fulfill it and make everything clear by revelation. So today we have a much deeper understanding because Jesus fulfilled those feasts. He himself, he fulfilled them. He fulfilled the law and the scriptures and the feast. And when we understand that, we can, if we don't understand the feast, then we don't understand what he came to fulfill.
Well, Avi, what would your diagnosis, if you will, be of the body the believers be for here in Israel? Is it healthy? Is it growing?
Oh, definitely. If you ask every congregation here in this country today, if they look back, let's say 5 years ago, they will say each one of them, one by one, we have grown so much. Now we are having big problems of space. What a good problem to have. Every congregation experiences a growth in them, if it's with the Russian immigrants or with just local Israelis who are coming to the Lord, or new immigrants from other countries, from Ethiopia or other countries, or America or Latin America. We are definitely seeing God is doing something, and I believe it has to do with that the harvest is definitely ready in Tel Aviv and in Israel, all of Israel. I believe like never before. I believe what we are seeing now, the growth that we are seeing, as leaders, we see the importance to raise up other leaders because we are believing for a revival, a big harvest to come, and we better be prepared for it.
Well, so unleavened bread is a festival of, you might say, purification. 7 days of eating this bread of affliction, this inconvenience, reminder of sin, all but it contains first fruits. The Sunday of resurrection, well, I won't take the thunder from our next program, but tune in and see about first fruits, what we've come to call Easter for some reason. But anyway, it's part of unleavened bread. It's the Sunday during that week, during the 7 days. Christians need reminders, too, about purification and about the laws of God and his preferences. You know, fire and brimstone sermons have now turned into ear-tickling sermons, and end times prophecy, which is full of negatives and dangers and so on, is now shifted away on the soft cloud of progressive dispensationalism. You know, we don't have any more end times. The inconvenience of loving the Jews, of witnessing to them, learning about Israel, where we're going for 1,000 years, and that may start tonight. We don't do that anymore either, because after all, the king's already sitting on the throne of David, the kingdom's starting. I was thinking about that one day, and I thought, the kingdom's supposed to start in that teaching like one of those moped bikes. Do you remember those? You push it along, you run along, and it starts itself kind of and goes faster and faster. And that's what we do. We vote in the right officials. We, our seminaries teach churchianity, and somehow, some way, we'll bring in the kingdom without having to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. It's ours. We're going to do it. This is the sort of inconvenience that we need, unleavened bread. We need the affliction. We need to be reminded of our holiness. Let's return to Scripture, starting with the seminaries, and Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.